Are there any apologies for absence over and above the people who are attending online? I'm not aware of any. Yep.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, from Councillor Mark Parker, I believe, and also from Councillor Bobby Alden, on the grounds that he's trying to persuade the good people of Worthington to
Thought he might
vote for him in the forthcoming by-election. Go, Bobby.
No, Bobby, we broke up here.
We'll not begrudge him that, will we? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Everybody else is either online or with us today. And thanks for coming along today in person. We do prefer in-person meetings, but it can get a bit difficult to attend when you're going to so many online, having to accommodate them in between other activities. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No?
No, Chair.
Okay. I'm going to keep my chair's remarks very brief and just make you all aware that Chris Gibbons, the commercial director from National Express West Midlands, is with us today online, and he will be available to answer any questions arising from the bus delivery monitoring report. There are items in there linked to changes in bus services and so on, and bus recovery, which you may like to address to him. Thank you. Another point I'd like to raise is I haven't had a chance to discuss this directly with Pete, but last week one of the member engagement groups, those of us who was there, sort of expressed our concern and discussed the future of the bus recovery funding, recovery from the COVID pandemic, that is, which is due to run out by the end of March. And we're seeing all sorts of changes on the network and so on. And this is something we can pick up in more detail, perhaps in the bus delivery report itself. But I agreed to raise our concerns at the Transport Strategy Board on Friday, which I did. I also did a bit of research around what appears to be going on with vis-a-vis the Department of Transport and the authorities and the Confederation of Passenger Transport and so on. The lead member for Transport Portfolio and officers who were there on Friday, well, obviously they're concerned that the funding should continue beyond the end of March, but felt reasonably confident that the government would not be letting the West Midlands down, particularly with the specifically with the Commonwealth Games almost upon us. You couldn't just leave it and turn your back on the situation only for that particular purpose. So I'm conveying that back to you. I'm not quite so confident myself, but I'd just be interested to know what members' views are on it, or whether Pete could give us a few more details than I managed to get on Friday.
Thanks, Chair. And although this is also part of agenda item 10 that we're looking to pick up in terms of the COVID-19 recovery update, but it is a fundamental point. I think there are lots of discussions and negotiations ongoing locally, regionally and nationally, and indeed the Mayor of the authority, Andy Street, is writing to both the Secretary of State for Transport and the Chancellor to set out these concerns, given that we are now in February, on February the 7th, and the funding effectively, as it currently stands, runs out on April the 6th. There are, we know, a lot of conversations going on within and around government, around the funding, and like others that have expressed, there are many of us that feel very hopeful that government wouldn't allow a situation whereby we see significant funding shortfalls come on April the 7th, which lead to a swathe of service changes and deregistrations. But it's also worth saying as well that the combined authority being able to identify this as a major risk also has, through its planning and budget planning, a mitigation plan in place. That doesn't mean a mitigation in being able to fill all of those gaps, but certainly with how we would look to review and manage the available budget for both subsidised services and for working with bus operators to retain the highest level of services possible across the region. And there are ongoing dialogues, and as you mentioned, National Express are on the call today, but there is ongoing dialogue, not only with National Express, but other operators to identify what the situation would be in the event of a no funding arrangement from government. But similarly, a lot of work going on to work with government and with other authorities, Urban Transport Group and other organisations, the Confederation of Passenger Transport, representing all operators, to work closely with government and lobby to ensure that that support, some form of support, will be put in place from April the 7th onwards.
As you say, with the West Midlands getting its fair share, or even more than its fair share, let's face it. Richard?
Yeah, the concern I've got is obviously locally or regionally, because I would hate to see major inroads made into the bus network. It goes counter to everything that we in the government say about public transport. Pete, I wonder if there is actually a sort of picture of what would happen, or what is likely to happen in terms of loss of network if there is no continued funding. I'm really worried about that. And actually, it's a national situation too, isn't it? Particularly in more rural parts of the country, it's not much of a bus network anyway, and you just worry that swathes of that are going to disappear as well if there's no continuation funding for the time being.
And there is a risk to services now in initial work that we have undertaken, and we made a report to the Combined Authority on the 14th of January that set out that the potential funding gap and risk in this region could be up to £50 million worth of shortfall in being able to provide the existing bus network through the financial year 2022-23. And if you translated that £50 million into bus network terms, you could see a risk of cuts of services of up to 20% of the bus network in that event. Now, that is a headline figure around a level of risk that exists in that funding, and ultimately we anticipate that there would be measures that we would take to manage some of that risk within that. But to give you the headline figures that you're asking for, that is the level of top line risk that we are reporting through to government, and seeking help and assurance to reassure us that that won't be the situation that we face in April.
Chairman?
Thank you. I also share your concerns when the government support comes to an end. The risk and the transport staff, like drivers and others working on the buses, and also the livelihood of some of the passengers who may depend on the bus services, these buses to go to work. So it is serious. While we are obviously urging government to put measures in place that this doesn't happen, what is the mitigating we can put in place while waiting for the government to decide on this? So is there anything we can do ourselves in the meantime to fix when the government come back to us, so that we don't have that gap where the tender could be already done? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor, there is a limit to what we can achieve, of course, because let us also recall that we have been in this situation around funding on the bus network at more than one occasion through the course of the pandemic itself. And at each occasion, we've undertaken quite a significant amount of work, and then the funding has materialised in the 11th hour to produce. So there is a limit as well to what we can manage in that time. What we have done is try to assess where and how and what plans we will put in place with our bus operator partners to manage some of those challenges across the network. And our bus operators have thus far committed quite strongly to working closely with us on ensuring that there is as much notification and working through what the network would look like, not just from a commercial perspective, but from a resident and customer and locality perspective, so that we can be agreeing what changes would need to take place in the event. And don't forget as well, there could be a whole, we're talking here about one extreme, a potential up to £50 million worth of cuts, and the other extreme, nothing. There are probably a whole raft of potential options that sit in between that, depending on what level of funding government do come forward with. And on the other side of that, not forgetting, of course, that as a region, we put forward a very ambitious BSIP, Bus Service Improvement Plan, in November to government, and we currently await government response to our BSIP as to what level of funding we will have from that as well. So that's another mitigation that we are working towards, and as well as that really important work about working closely with government and others to set out the problem to the risks to the region, and as the chair said earlier on, the implications to just making sure that we have a network that is running smoothly throughout this year, as well as for Commonwealth Games. So I think that also has generated the ear and support of many within government as well.
And the Bus Alliance full board meets this week, and we have the papers for it just this morning. So the Alliance will be looking at this situation as well, keeping a track on it. Thank you. Okay, let us move on then to the minutes of the 10th of January. Can we approve them as being correct? So Tim, then Zeal.
Right, I believe that Councillor Alan Taylor was present. I think he wanted to say something.
Yeah, I've got my hand up actually, Tim.
Okay, come on, Alan, then.
It's just that I was present at the meeting, but aren't on the list of attendees.
Right, and you were present in person?
Yes.
Okay, better add him to the list. I think there's another kind of correction in that sense. Zia.
Thank you, Chair. The minutes actually, the Commonwealth Games, it was discussed last meeting, and I raised the question about periodic transportation system during the games time, and it was mentioned by Councillor Idris, but it was done by me, Councillor Islam. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the second paragraph. It's section 46. It's Councillor Zia Islam who queried the plans at Perry Bar. Any other corrections? No? Okay, they agreed then. Let's move on to matters arising. Chris.
Hi, sorry, forgot about that. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, if this is to go matters arising. 2 meetings ago, so it's from the minutes of 2 meetings ago and not the immediate minutes. I didn't raise it last month because I was told we would receive a briefing note, about the decision to zone the metro fares. We haven't received a briefing note, but since then there has been a publication of another document re-talking about these zonal fare structures. So it feels like the TDC was promised to receive a report. They didn't receive the report, and now there has been a further publication. And there was also a briefing note circulated to the TDC saying that the 6th of February was the date at which the trams would be re-running to the library on a 10-minute service. It doesn't appear that this is the case. Can we have some confirmation on whether that is still the case, or what the progress is on that, because we're now at a stage where we haven't had a report back. It appears that the deadline from the previous thing we were told has changed, that was in the minutes, and people sort of online and in the public sphere are getting a bit antsy about it. It might be worth clearing it up now.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chair.
I think Anne may have sent out a briefing, a general briefing with an update on that. Can you confirm?
I'll answer the second question first, if that's okay.
Go for it.
We did say that we would resume services to library in February, subject to sufficient trams being available for us to keep that consistent, reliable service. There have been other sort of technical issues, so obviously general maintenance to the trams that we've got on the fleet, given the kilometres, etc., that they're doing, and we are hoping imminently to return the services to the library. But as I said in my draft note, my note that went round to you is that subject to having sufficient trams available. So we're not quite there yet, but we will be very soon.
Thank you.
Okay. On the briefing note on the zoning fairs, I'm not quite sure why that hasn't been actioned. So we obviously have agreed where we are with those metro zoning fairs, so we will get that briefing note to you in between meetings, so you don't have to wait till the next meeting. Is that right, Pete?
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. We used to, if I recall correctly, have an action tracker, so that any matters that we discussed where members asked for briefings or something like that would be noted on an action tracker.
Yes,
so it could be
right.
it could be ticked off, as it were. So, for example, at the last meeting on page 3, I asked for further information regarding Kings Norton and Snow Hill railway stations as part of the Midlands Rail Hub. And it'd be nice to see an action tracker to say, yes, that has been circulated to as a briefing to members of this committee, etc., etc. So the plea here, and to pick up obviously other points, could we see that restored, please?
Yes, that's a good idea. I mean, we have them at most of the megs to plot. Tanya?
Yeah, Chair, members, that's fine, that's noted. What I'll do is I'll go back through the previous minutes for this municipal year and create an action log and then note when they've been actioned as well. So that's fine, I can do that.
Any other matters arising? Okay, thank you. Let's look at the forward plan. Not many slides left to this, so coming up to the end of the year. Any comments on that?
Chair, sorry, there is one addition. You will be receiving an update on the LTP consultation.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So that will also be coming in for the last meeting.
Right, so that's LTP consultation to be added to the March meeting. Yep. Just move. Right, moving on to the bus delivery monitoring report, which I think will attract quite a lot of attention. Is it Pete or John who will?
I'll take it, Chair. Okay, thank you. So there are some updates to the report that you have received in your agenda pack. As ever, it's very fast-paced around bus at the moment with the recovery from the pandemic and the various lockdowns and changes in the funding that we've already discussed this morning. So there are some updates. Firstly, an apology that the formatting of the report seems to have gone slightly awry in the production of the PDF. So the paragraph numbers are missing. So apologies for that, but hopefully we'll be able to keep each other signed where we are. So I won't dwell too much on the first elements of the part around recovery, because Pete will pick that up as part of the update later on the agenda, and we'll be happy to answer any questions as part of that. But I would just like to highlight to members around Ring and Ride. We are seeing relatively low recovery in that area, so currently only seeing around 20% of pre-COVID patronage. However, we are starting to see that now pick up, and as a result of that, we've recently increased the service to operate on a Sunday, as well as providing a service Monday through to Saturday. And we are looking at plans to elongate the day, so it runs later into the evening, and also increasing the available resource, so there's more opportunity to travel for users of those services. In that same sort of area, We have also, with the Community Transport Operators Panel, just at the end of last week, submitted an expression of interest to the DfT's Tackling Loneliness Through Transport funding bid. Relatively small bid in comparison to some of the other ones that we've put in, so around £500,000, but it's seeking to introduce a small number of buses right into the heart of communities to act as almost like a mobile community centre where people can go just for a little bit of companionship in the first instance, but also then to access advice and help around things like banking, nutrition, debt, or just general advice on questions that they've got. The second part of that bid is then to offer subsidised journeys to people to attend groups that have previously reduced their frequency in meeting through the pandemic and are having trouble re-establishing themselves. So things like Age Concern, MenCap, and various other groups to support people to be able to offer some subsidised transport to enable those groups to re-establish and offer group travel. So we're waiting to hear. We'll hopefully hear by the end of the financial year to establish that programme next year. As Pete mentioned, the BSIP was submitted. We had hoped to have heard by now whether we would be receiving funding from that. We received an update from the DfT at the back end of last week to say that we will hear by the end of this month. So we're still waiting to hear, but in the meantime, we are working through the programme of what we said we would deliver on the BSIP and working on all scenarios of funding, whether we get all of it, none of it, or some of it, and what that programme would look like under each of those scenarios, but also looking at what we would be delivering under the CRUSTS programme as well, with a particular focus on bus priority in various locations across the region. The report gives some details on network changes and what has gone before, but just to highlight members, the two members that we are expecting further network changes through January in response to changing travel patterns and actually an acceleration in numbers of passengers now starting to come back and trying to readdress some of the capacity reductions that we've seen in previous months, but also changes in travel demand and changes on the network as well. So, for example, we've seen improvements in flow in some directions around Penny Bar and the outer circle. So we are working with National Express colleagues, potential changes in that area as well. Under demand responsive and West Midlands on demand, really pleased to announce that we've launched a new service from the 1st of February, which expands on what we'd currently got in and around Warwick University. So the new area delivered with financial support from Coventry City Council, focused on New Century Park, now extends the area all the way from Meriden across to the University Hospital and all points in between, and as far south as Leamington and Warwick, working with our colleagues in Warwickshire and at the university as well. So fully demand responsive transport service. It operates when you want it, where you want it to go in that area, Monday to Friday, 7 in the morning through to 8 o'clock at night. So it's a 2-year pilot, first of its kind in the region. So we're quite excited about that one to see how it plays out. The Zebra funding bid that is noted in the report. In the report, we talk about a fast-tracked submission going in. Through our discussions with DfT, that has now been put down to a standard track, and the business case for the introduction of hydrogen electric buses will go in on this Friday, and we're just working that through to get that in. And then last but not least, under the AQPS and enhanced partnership, the current Advanced Quality Partnership Scheme in Birmingham City Centre, which some of you here will have gone through the pain of us going through last time, will expire this coming July. It's been in place for 10 years with the first of its kind in the country. We now need to understand exactly what we need to do with that, so we're going through a period of reviewing the current arrangements with a a plan to incorporate them into the West Midlands Enhanced Partnership. For those that don't know, the AQPS and the Enhanced Partnership, as it will be in the future, governs the emission standards of buses in the city centre. It governs how long buses can dwell at bus stops. It includes requirements from the local authority about implementation and enforcement of bus priority measures around customer service, etc. So we're really keen, obviously, to keep that in place and ensure that we maintain the provision as part of the enhanced partnership as we can. Okay, and that was it. The rest of the report is as we share.
Okay. Remembering that Chris Gibbons is here, so you may want to frame some of your questions towards him. Alex had asked me last autumn about the prospect of attending some of these meetings where bus business was there on the agenda, and I'm pleased to see that we've followed through and got them with us here today for this particular item. Are there any questions? Chris?
Sorry, I'll put my hand up and immediately went into my own world then, I apologise. I think first of all, going through that, it was really good to see. It's a really commendable effort on the Birmingham Cross City network and really commendable on the Coventry Electric Bus City. That will have massive effects on public transport in the region. I've got one question on the figures with our current 73% occupancy compared to pre-COVID. How does that compare to other regions? I appreciate you might not have that to hand, but is this sort of trailing the national average at the moment? And then I have got two more questions. Sorry, on 2.13. The statement in the report says all stop flags have now been changed to the new brand. That's not true. There's a number in Wolverhampton which haven't been changed. Do you know what? When I read the report, I did drive past them in Wolverhampton today just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. And there are a few in Wolverhampton that still haven't been done there. So just for the knowledge of the report, that statement isn't strictly true. And then 2.15. I'm really happy to see the digital updates are really working and are going around. There's been a couple of resident concerns in Wolverhampton that there's now no physical copies. Now, I appreciate we're in a very fast-paced world of service changes at the moment, and we're going to be in that fast-paced world for a couple of months. When can we anticipate that some physical information might return to the bus stations? Is that something we are anticipating to bring back, or are we going for a digital shift over? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, just to pick those up in order. So the recovery is actually ahead of that now. So the network is getting close to 80% of pre-COVID recovery, and we actually see higher than that over the weekend, which I think is a reflection of patronage is coming back stronger for leisure travel, which again reflects people still working from home. It's largely in line with other city regions. There is a north-south divide, so it seems to be recovering slightly quicker the further north you go, and slower as you get towards London, and being Midlands, we are slap bang in the middle of where we are. There's obviously been a number of things that we've tried to do to accelerate that growth, including a fares reduction, and we are also looking now at a plan to encourage holders of English National Concessionary Travel Cards back onto the network, because the recovery amongst those pass holders is lower than it is for commercial passengers. So we're about where we think we need to be in that area. In terms of the flags, thank you very much for flagging that, no pun intended. If you could give me the details of where those flags are, and we'll make sure we get those swapped over. Apologies that the report isn't as accurate as it could be. I've been assured that was the case. And then in terms of physical timetables, you're absolutely right, Councillor. The reason that we're not publishing at the moment is because things are changing almost on a daily basis. It's really hard for us to be able to keep up. However, if people do want a physical copy, if they phone the customer services line, then we can print them off and post them out. Equally, if they go to the TFWM travel shop at Wolverhampton bus station, we can print them out at that location as well. And we are currently, in terms of the longer term for that, we need to review the provision of printed material. We absolutely agree and understand that it's got a place, but it is changing. More people have got access to the digital means, so we need to think about how we are efficient, how we keep it affordable, taking into account the sort of changing technologies and the accessibility to them. So, thank you.
I think in year one of the pandemic, the West Midlands were ahead of some of the other transport authority regions in patronage. What's happened, do you think? Have they done something up north that we haven't?
Chair.
I actually have the information that was published on the 28th last week.
Nice, excellent.
And in terms of the bus percentage of pre-COVID, TfWM is actually top at 77%.
There you go.
Based on that data, just followed behind TfL, which is at 73%. And then our colleagues, Mersey Travel, 70%, and then the others are below that. So actually, we've done quite well. That's based on last week's figures, and as John will probably tell you, it moves every week, doesn't it, John? And that was up 2% from the week before.
Because you used to do a weekly report, didn't you? That went out through Birmingham Connected and all the other networks.
Yeah, we still do that week. Well, we do it on a daily basis, but it's all online now.
All right.
You can service yourself. You can have a look online for that information in terms of the travel trends in the West Midlands. What we don't publish is what is happening in the other authorities, as you can imagine. But we can share that web link, so that information is there across all of the modes, so bus, trains.
Excellent. So it's an action then to share that web link so we can all keep an eye on it. But I was right earlier about the patronage holding up better overall. So far, so good in the West Midlands. Right. Tim, had you next, and then Richard.
Thank you very much. And I think Dave also wants to come in at some point.
I'll put you down at the end then.
Okay. First question is number 11. As we all know, it was a circular route. It then went to, quote, an overlapping service, unquote. You say that changes are afoot. When are we going back, as was the stated intention, to that circular service and no longer an overlapping service? Is it still being actively considered? If it is, what are we doing to do that? As we know, with the original decision from a TDC briefing report, I think written by you, John, there was concerns about the LTN in King's Heath in terms of affecting the number 11, as well as the Perry Bar Highways Major Improvement Scheme, in inverted commas improvement. I still yet to be convinced. So where are we in terms of the number 11? Question 2, package 3, the bridge, South Birmingham, or the bridge I'm referring to is over a watercourse along the Alcester Road South, where it goes to a single lane. And if we are seriously going to improve the A435, we have to sort that bridge out. I know that, I believe, Anne in a previous life, working with David Ball, was well aware of this bridge over the A435, Alcester Road South, and the bus improvement plans. And unless we do that, that is a natural bottleneck. And if we're going to substantially improve bus travel, we do have to look at that bridge and sort it out. It's where 2 lanes go into 1, only for it to go into 2 again. As I say, I'm pretty sure Anne remembers all the discussions we've had.
Just about.
We've had about that. And package 4, which isn't mentioned, but I'm going to raise it, which is, I believe, the A38 Cross City Bus Proposals, in whatever form they are. Really interesting to hear from the report, the briefing report this morning about the CRSTS and the segregated cycle along the A38 South. I'm just hoping that there isn't silo working, and when we develop package 4 alongside segregated cycle lanes, they are complementary and they don't they don't impinge on what might want to be done in the future, i.e. future-proofing it in terms of competing road space, because I think that's particularly important. And we don't want to spend a whole heap of money from the CRSTS only to realise we have to undo the work we've done in order to deliver package 4 for the cross-city bus network. So I hope that's taken into account. And the big difference, question 4, about the AQPS, and I well remember going through this, is that obviously we've now got the clean air zone in Birmingham, and again, just seeking assurance that the AQPS changes will fully incorporate all the clean air zone proposal, or what's been implemented as part of that. Thank you, Chair.
I think we'll turn to Chris Gibbons really to talk to us about the number 11 situation route. Are you?
Certainly, thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors. Can I also just give my overall thanks for the opportunity to attend today's meeting? It is gratefully received, so thank you for letting me be with you today. On the outer circle, it is probably too early to say at the moment in terms of making decisions. What we did say at the time was that we'd look at the facts and the figures. It's interesting, since the changes have been made to the outer circle, punctuality now is running at about 95%. That compares with previous changes where it was running as low as 75% on occasions. Another factor to consider is also actually how the different routes have returned. So as we focused on earlier, the West Midlands as a whole has actually, it's generally 2 to 3% ahead of the UK bus average. Within that, there are obviously routes themselves grow at different levels, and the outer circle has actually been outperforming some of the other routes on the network. So I think this was probably about a week or so ago now, so it won't reflect the latest uptick, but it was running about 83%. So it's one of our better returning routes. So I guess before any decisions are made in terms of futures to that route, we've got to look at performance both from a reliability, punctuality, but also from a customer perspective, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think the number 11 for quite some time had been doing a boomerang kind of manoeuvre at the peak tea time period between Perry Bar and Sellyoak, when you just needed to get another vehicle moving, in the other direction. I remember discussing this with National Express some years ago. So there always has been that accommodation to shift more people, get more journeys covered at the peak hours. Right, can we look to Transport for the West Midlands questions or contributions, addition to what Chris has said?
Take those as well,
yeah.
Chair. So I think the second question, Councillor Hooks, was around the watercourse bridge on Alcester Road. That's I apologise, that is news to me. That one, a new one for me. So I'll speak to Anne and bow to her greater knowledge about that, and we'll have a look at it as part of the programme. However, having said that, obviously we've got a funding package that's already established for that, and it isn't within the budget to address that particular concern. So it might be one for us to pick up with BCC or form part of a future funding package. But you're a distinct advantage to me knowing that area and that particular issue. Absolutely on the A38 and all of the other cross-city programmes, and making sure that we incorporate the cycle, pedestrian and bus improvements all into single schemes, and taking the corridor approach to that. And indeed, it's required of us as part of the crust submission that we need to be thinking about these things collectively, and it's a requirement of funding that comes for capital infrastructure schemes from the DFT. The bus priority now needs to be explicitly thought about as part of developing the schemes, and if it can't be, there needs to be an explanation as to why. So we see that in the bus team here anyway as being a distinct improvement and advantage to us to taking those forward. But yes, thank you for drawing that to our attention, and we'll note that. And then on the AQPS and the CAS, obviously the buses currently it's a requirement that they are Euro 6 emission standard as part of the AQPS. That is the minimum standard currently within the CAS. So we're meeting the emission standards. We obviously need to look forward and just understand at what point can we get to zero emission to help even further. But the thing that I'm actually really keen to get into the AQPS and the EP going forward is the other things that were promised as part of the CAS in terms of bus priority, and that's the bit that we'll be trying to incorporate and speaking to colleagues at Birmingham City Council to make sure that we've got that commitment from the local authority to incorporate that into the CAS as well. But yeah, just to assure you, in terms of emission standards, absolutely already meeting those requirements, and obviously the operators have to pay the fine if they don't, which they are not keen on doing at this moment.
I'll turn to David now for his remarks, and I think we will ultimately give Chris Gibbons a chance to address the service changes, Annex's service changes, and other aspects that appear in the report that relate to his business. David.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The item I'd like to discuss is on Package 3 West, and this is concerning the bus gate on Burnley Island, or what was known Burnley Island. It's a crossing Northern Ireland these days, shared between Dudley and Sandwell. On the Dudley side, outside the Tesco supermarket there's a bus gate, and it's causing a lot of problems with delays getting across there. I mentioned this in the past, and perhaps the consultation that's taking place in this month, according to the report here, I could have a copy of, just have a look at what is proposed to be done there. For the simple reason I use the 74 service into West Brom, and you always a delay there. You watch the traffic lights change 3 or 4 times on the crossroads there before you can get across. On the Sandwell side, it's not producing any difficulties whatsoever. But on the Dudley side, with the bus gate outside the Tesco, it at times it's a big delay on the buses getting through. While we've got the opportunity, Madam Chairman, of having someone from from National Express, I'd be interested with the comments that have been made in this room today about the recovery of the passengers on the network as a whole, especially the passengers National Express. I doubt whether this is being done in a way of putting the figures all together, so that we haven't got identification from garage to garage where the patronage is low and where it's not recovering it should do. And in particular, Madam Chairman, I'd like to talk about the number 1 service from Tettenhall to Dudley. This is getting really pathetic. It's supposed to be a 10-minute service during the day. You can sometimes wait for half an hour and above. There's dissatisfaction and people are not using the service because it's just getting a bad name with frequency. And this also applies to number 27. And these seem to be come from one particular garage, and that's Park Lane, Wolverhampton. Is there any way of knowing if the recovery down at that garage is, in line with the 70 or 80% that's been spoken about in this room? Because the services are getting, what I can say, a bit. I don't be careful the terminology I use, but it's not satisfactory. Finally, Madam Chairman, how do I find out what takes place at the West Midlands Bus Alliance meetings these days? We don't seem to have any feedback at all from that organisation of any of our meetings. Thank you.
Well, we've got some feedback in this report. It's not a public meeting, is it? It's okay.
No, it's not, Chair, but normally we do, and obviously there is the report that comes to this committee as a Bus Alliance report before it goes on to the Combined Authority Board as well. But if there is a sort of shortfall in representational feedback, then maybe that's something that we can we can think about how that's shared more widely.
And we pick it up at putting passengers first too, don't we? Yeah. And then we relay our notes from the meeting. Okay, any feedback for David?
Yes, Chris, if I can ask you to address the service issues, but I'll just really quickly on the bus gate at Burnley Island. There is a prelim design that has been approved to go out to consultation. I can't see any reason why we can't share that with you, Councillor. So I'll ask Kaylee to pick that up with you direct and get that over.
Thank you very much.
No, Chris, over to you.
Certainly, thank you. Apologies, I've just taken my camera off because I'm having signal strength difficulties at the moment. On service change as a whole, and I guess, Chair, this also alludes to your earlier comment about the changes we've been having to make. I guess within our sector, as across many sectors and across the industry as a whole for the bus sector, we've been having to balance the providing reliable, punctual service with also some of the driver situation that we've seen, both from a shortage perspective and also a sickness perspective. Which has led to some of the difficult decisions we've been making in recent times. Hopefully, many of those will be temporary and we'll look to reintroduce at the earliest opportunity. In terms of the driver shortage itself, we've had plans in place both from a starter perspective, so we've been heavily focusing on recruitment campaigns and marketing behind that to attract people, and also obviously to address some of the leaser stats around terms and conditions, etc., to address the flow there. It's pleasing to note, actually, from a sickness perspective, we have seen significant improvement in recent weeks, and obviously that will have an impact on services. On Service 1 in particular, the Tetnall to Dudley, Councillor, I would welcome the opportunity to talk to you about in detail a bit more, to get a bit more understanding and see or hear your feedback in that, if that's okay. If we could do that, like I said, I'll be most welcome to do that.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to do it.
Right, there you go. Any other questions or items to report? Sam?
Thank you, Chair. Just for an observation about the number 11 was in the Wellington Road and Aston Lane. It is a practical observation because of the roadworks are almost completing now, and I hope it will be, resume 100%, in place. So this is my only observation because I live nearby, live in Peribad, so I know about it. Thank you.
Yes, we will, Councillor. We committed that when the service was broken, every major change to the traffic management, including completion of the scheme, that decision would be reviewed. So, as Chris has said on the call there, it was reviewed last month when the traffic management change decision was taken, not to link it back up because of the improvements that they've had, but we will be committing to be doing that as we go forward. We do know how important it is for residents.
Thank you.
Okay, Pervez, just clocked you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is already asked and answered, but I'd like to say to Chris, it is a very good news that it is recovery is led by our buses. That's what we want. And sir, once again, I emphasize to you, we need the frequency back of the buses. It's not good enough, that the drivers were sick, the drivers were ill, shortage of drivers. It's a massive company, National Expresses, and we cannot accept that kind of reliability. To be quite honest, you guys should have envisaged that these kind of problems and issues and sort it out, because in Coventry, the buses are all over the place. It's a mess. It's the complaints I had. I never had these kind of complaints before. And so once again, I emphasize to you that all of us are really passionate about buses. Buses are backbone in our region. Without buses, the region will become standstill. And if we want to fulfill our goals regarding air pollution and congestion, then please, you have to sort out your job. You have to provide the drivers. Without drivers, there are no buses, and without buses, as I said, it will be standstill. It's not good enough, sir. I emphasize to you that there is a shortage of drivers. You should guys envisage this and provide drivers and bring drivers on the board. Whatever it is, if you can't do the job, then give up. But we cannot have people losing their jobs because the transport isn't there. Thank you.
I'd rather see buses with passengers on every 20 minutes than see them going past even emptier than they are now every 5 minutes. It's a question of balancing out the patronage and the capacity to deliver a service in these times. However, Chris.
Now, before, Madam Chairman, let me please say, I take your point, I hear that, but at the end of the day, They are providing a service. It's an essential service. And believe me, in Coventry, people are being let down. It's got to be said. The operators, they need to do more. And whether they, especially at peak times, and they have let people down. There isn't a frequency of bus services. There isn't a reliability in Coventry. It's awful.
Right, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris Gibbons.
Councillor, thank you for your comments, and I take on, well, firstly, thank you for your passion also for the buses. We too are extremely passionate, and I take on full our responsibility for our customers to make sure we put the services that they need to rely on. We're fully aware, it gets people to jobs, it gets people to doctors' appointments, vaccinations. We are seeing an improvement both from a sickness perspective, which should therefore allow us to make changes in the future, which will be positive. Equally, and I'm sure you'll appreciate, it has been a challenge for the industry as a whole, not just ourselves. It is one of our number one priorities to actually, as I say, it's why we focused on the starters piece around recruitment, levers, etc., around T's and C's. So please rest assured it is very much front of our mind, and we have plans in place to address.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other points or questions for anybody?
Yes, Madam Chair, very quickly. The point I was making earlier on about the number one service can easily be addressed. It's not a shortage of drivers, it's 3 or 4 vehicles arriving at the same time. And what is happening, that no adjustment is being made on the service at all to get it back running normal. And that's where the problem is. It's not the drivers are short, it's the buses with traffic being held up, running together. And they need to be adjusted. And that's what's not happening. And that's what's causing the problem.
Right. Any other comments? Okay, wow. Okay, well, thank you for that, all contributors and writers. Pete.
Chair, if I may, just wanted to pick up a separate point that just around the report itself, in addition to all of the content, that just noting from a committee perspective that the enhanced partnership that John spoke about, there was the report that this committee reviewed last time around that then went on to the combined authority, which was approved earlier on in January, and of course just to reiterate from that report that the enhanced partnership that's placed in here was the subject of part of that report to the authority itself, and the bus options work that has been looking at the options available within the Bus Services Act 2017 highlighted the opportunities available, which were generally set out by government as enhanced partnership or franchising, and our preferred option has been to work with the bus operators to identify the way in which we can move forward with delivering an enhanced partnership across the region. I just wanted to reiterate that the size and scale of this, the magnitude of it is huge, really, and of course this committee has the delegated responsibility from the combined authority itself for the implementation of the enhanced partnership. So the committee might want to consider, in terms of the forward plan for this year, 2022, about how and when the updates and the proposals around the enhanced partnership come forward towards the committee towards implementation. And of course, the agreement from the combined authority was that would also, alongside that, undertake some background work around a full franchising assessment, because obviously our aspiration and opportunity here is that the enhanced partnership delivers on the vision for bus and the national bus strategy to see that we can deliver on the objectives within the region. So just might want to think about, as a committee, putting some time and on the forward plan into receiving the updates on those and approving them in due course as well.
Because it is one of our legal responsibilities, isn't it? So the enhanced partnership and its formation and delivery and consultation on it as well. Right, so we'll move on now then, and I thank you again for your input and participation. Now, next report is item 10. Can I just note that on the previous report, it explains that the Putting Passengers First member engagement group had seen the report and so on, and I suppose you may add my name to that as the lead on that. Really, we should be having Councillor Grinsel's name and his member engagement group. in the box for where, you know, the report has been considered by, and it just says not applicable. So we really need member engagement groups where they've been able to have a copy of the report and the lead members pre-agenda group to be mentioned.
Thank you, Chair. On that very point, I discussed this with Councillor Grinsell at our group meeting in advance of this meeting. And Councillor Grinsell assured me that he had read the report, especially those relating to his lead membership role, and would be able to talk on it at this meeting. Excellent. So we're in one sense ahead of this game, thanks to Councillor Grinsell's vigilance. So I'm sure if you wanted Councillor Grinsell to introduce this report, he would be more than happy to do so.
That was going to be my next move or next request. We only had half the report available, the safer travel section, and it was Mark's main resilience input that we were waiting for. So Bob, as I was going to say, over to you.
Thank you, Kath. Yeah, you'll see when you read the MEG report that the crime and antisocial behaviour figures were quite damning, in my opinion. And whilst I get the reasonings behind it, you know, the COVID, we all know, has got a lot to answer for, but come on, let's get over this. Let's get back to some kind of normality. The increase in crime and antisocial behaviour is exponential, especially on the bus routes. Now, we here in the West Midlands will be the centre of world attention during the Commonwealth Games. We want visitors to this region to feel safe when going on the buses or the trains or any means of public transport. And, you know, and whilst the report is factual, I can't see within the report what is being done to certainly alleviate potential problems, especially during the Commonwealth Games. I mean, yeah, it's important for now and beyond, but, you know, God forbid that we had certain crimes or antisocial behaviour that happened to occur during that period of time and highlighted by the world media. It's something that this region has to address. And, you know, at 2.12, we recruited 3 transport safety officers. 3. I think, if my memory serves, that took us to a total of 9. You know, I'm happy for officers to tell me differently. But the 9, and there were silly numbers, multiple hundreds of numbers of bus stops and bus stations and rail stations and points where people join and where these crimes and antisocial behaviour is are being committed. I would like to personally ask, this is a personal question, I've not run it by anybody before, but what is the PCC intending to do, especially over the Commonwealth Games period? I can see Paul's got his hand in the air ready to answer me. But you know, I'm absolutely astonished at the increase, and I can't, I'm sorry, put it down to COVID. Thank you.
Right, so which officer is going to kick this one off?
So we've got Mark Corbin and Paul Franks who are online, who put detail into this report, but I will answer the Commonwealth Games question in particular, and then I'll allow Paul and Mark to sort of answer what other things are being done with the PCC, so on more generally in terms of the Safer Travel plan. Obviously, as part of the planning for the Commonwealth Games, West Midlands Police are leading the security around that. That includes the Safer Travel team here that work with us at Transport for West Midlands, and also British Transport Police. And they are looking at what that deployment looks like and how all of that safer and secure measures are undertaken on our public transport network as part of our public transport planning as well. You'll have seen that also cross-referenced in the Games Transport Plan, which has now been adopted as the statutory plan for the Games as well. It's now been laid in Parliament, in parliamentary libraries as well. So there is quite a lot of work that is happening around Commonwealth Games to make sure that not just visitors, but all of our residents and others who will be asking to use the public transport system do feel safe. If we need more details around that, I'm sure we can supply that. But Paul and Mark will probably just take you through what Safer Travel planning team are doing, the 3 transport safety officers alongside the wider Safer Travel partnership and the police officers that are working as part of that. So I'll probably hand over to Paul first.
Before you do that, Chair, I'm sorry. I'm working on an iPad. Can I ask who answered that question, please?
Apologies, it was Anne Shaw. Councillor.
Thank you, Anne. Just wanted to check.
Okay.
Right, Paul or Mark?
Thank you, Chair. We'll pass to Paul.
I'll take it first, if that's okay. Then Mark might want to come in. Thanks, Councillor Grinsell, for your queries, and I know I came and spoke at the Safe and Sustainable Transport Meg and also the Putting Passengers First Meg, so some people around the table have had some kind of explanation previously. Whilst I obviously agree with you that an increase in crime is not acceptable, and we really don't want that. To put it in context, we've still had 150 million journeys on buses in the West Midlands in the last 12 months, and of that we've had that just under 3,000 crimes reported. We've also had additional patrols put in the area from the Safer Travel policing team, and we focus on through our tasking process, and you'll see further in the report that 28 actions were created from that Safer Travel tasking process, in which we identified issues and worked with partners to try and tackle those issues. In terms of the transport safety officers, we have only got 3. We've got a bid with the bus service improvement plan for an additional 9, and I've started negotiations with National Express. They're keen to invest with the potential of another 8 coming, being funded by National Express. So if everything were to be successful, we could go from 3 up to 20 in a very short period of time, which would start to make a difference. And we're planning on running a survey, both internal and external, with passengers, members of staff around the transport safety officers, because they've now been with us for 12 months and have done over 2,800 hours of hours on patrol. And whilst I agree with councillors and others around the table that 3 isn't enough, that's what we were able to start with, and that's what we're obviously running with at the moment. Just get my email up, sorry. But I'd also like to focus on what we have been doing as a police and antisocial behaviour team. We've had an increase, asked for an increase in reporting through making more reporting methods available. West Midlands Police, as I've said, have seen a suitable or reasonable increase as well in the same period as we have. And they've put it down to exiting a national lockdown with attitudes towards crime and the police. Victims are reporting more crime to the police, which is obviously a good thing. Further third-party reporting is happening, and that's also good. And West Midlands Police have also been ensuring that all crimes are ethically recorded, and that will always have a slight increase in relation to any reports. There's also been increased crime prevention and reporting campaigns.
So all of that would add to us having an increase. In terms of the criminal damage offences that were highlighted as one of the crime types that had gone up, we had 4 separate series of criminal damage on routes all over Birmingham and the wider West Midlands, which accounted for about 100 of the reported crimes. But we made several arrests as a safer travel policing team, and those people are currently going through the criminal justice system. So whilst I accept that crime has gone up, we are doing something about it. The safer travel police team and ASB teams have tried to increase their presence out at all our stations, all our bus stations, bus stops, and obviously that will be further supported with the additional powers that we're going to gain through, or have got now, through the bus bylaws.
Right, Chris.
Shall I go before Bob? Okay, he's got his hand back up. I don't know if he's got a supplementary, or shall I go now? Oh, okay.
You're okay.
Okay, cool. Sorry. So I've got a couple of questions. A couple of them actually lead on from what Bob was saying and actually go on from what you were saying then. So if we have 3 TSOs now, BSIP, if we get capital funding, could bring us up to 12. We might be able to source an extra 8 from private sources. That seems to be where we're at, to about a total of 20 TSOs. Good, because I could have got that arithmetic wrong. It has happened before. That's not an enormous quantity of resource over a population of circa 3 million. And now, I have no problem with that. I love to see that we are starting to make a change. And I think where they are present, they will make a really good difference. If I'm to quote from the report, however, it says their intention is, begin quote, to provide a visible presence on the public transport network, close quote. Now, that won't be possible with 20. That won't be possible with 100 in some cases, unless they were to patrol central areas such as a bus station or a train station. Now, when I think about that, I think about Birmingham, New Street, Wolverhampton, Coventry, who already have British Transport Police presence. So my question is, where are they patrolling? What are they doing? It's clear that they're doing an admirable job. I'm not criticising the concept or the system. But what are they doing that they are not already doubling up either what the British Transport Police are doing, or how could they possibly be acting in a way that would make them visible on the network? That's my question 1. Question 2 actually relates to the bus bylaws, so I'm very glad you've helped me segue on to them. The law is obviously a very blunt instrument. Is it possible we could have a circulation of the exact text that's in these bylaws? Because my issue I take with them at Umbridge, one of them comes from a complaint from a resident who has read the report saying, actually, the control of animals, while I can see exactly what we're doing, actually, if we're having these dead city centre livings, people are living with their pets in flats and they're living with their things, and they do need to take their dogs, their cats on public transport. This is just a factual reality of that. How will that interact with the control of animals thing, and how will we do that, fairly? Because, I know a lot of people that they don't have access to a car. Their dog needs to go to the vet. They need to go on the bus to the vet. How are we going to deal with that? Again, that comes down to the law being a blunt instrument. The second one is the intoxication. Now, the intoxication, I can see exactly where we're coming from. What we're trying to prevent is people drinking on bus stops or drinking on buses. I appreciate that. I can see how that would work. I understand it. How will this interact with the actual practical reality of how people use bus stops? What we need to do is get people, it's the end of the night out, it's Broad Street. I've been on Broad Street at midnight waiting for a bus in a state that would be far beyond intoxication, quite possibly, and I'm sure many people have.
Public meeting, Chris.
Unfortunately, this was also in public, so here we are. But no, joking aside, many people, they go to the pub, they've had a couple, they'll be in a state of what would legally be defined as intoxication. How is this policed? How is this worded? And how will this be, implemented? I can see what we're trying to avoid. But the problem with the law is it doesn't have room for this kind of nuance in it. How are we wording it? What's the exact word? And how are we going to make sure that these powers aren't used inappropriately? Because we all support the bylaws and we all understand exactly what it's trying to achieve. But sometimes what the law is trying to achieve is not what it does. And how can we interact with that?
Okay, Councillor, thanks very much. I'll tackle the first point in terms of the visibility. That's picked up through the safer travel tasking process that involves many partners around the table, all the operators, and also we're taking all the antisocial behaviour reports coming into NatX and other resources through our CSA number, and we'll then focus that TSO visibility on our problem and high ASB routes. So that's how the visibility is improved. Yes, I agree with 3, it's difficult, but that's how we're focusing and increase the efforts on those key bus routes that are causing us the most problems. And that's changed obviously month by month, week by week, depending on where those matters are being reported. In terms of the bus bylaws, just to make it clear, the bus bylaws relate to bus premises only. Despite our best efforts, we were unable to get bus bylaws to be allowed on buses because they said we had existing legislation on which to tackle those problems. And specifically answering your 2 points around the control of animals and intoxication. In terms of the animals, yes, I accept that some people do not have cars and they need to travel on the buses. They would be allowed to do that if NatX and other operators are happy with them travelling with their animals on the buses. The issue would come back to what is happening when there are bus interchanges, really, the stations, bus stops, etc. We have a particular problem at the moment, if you like, as an example, where this would be utilised. But there's a gentleman who frequents Pool Meadow in Coventry, and he will sit and throw the ball for his dog, so letting the dog run around the bus station. Well, whilst I accept he should have perhaps his dog with him, but it should be under control and not being potentially putting other users of that station in difficulty. And in terms of intoxication, no people who will start to enforce these bylaws will do so without any notes of guidance and suitable training. So in terms of the intoxication, that's aimed at also people drinking with open canisters and cans, so we could take those off them. So if people are intoxicated, what all the officers would have to do is engage with those individuals, explain the situation, encourage them to do the right thing, and then where necessarily enforcement. And so whilst I accept, having been a police officer for 31 years, the law can be a blunt instrument, there's also that element of discretion in terms of if you've got 4 or 5 people who are happy and jovially standing at a bus station and, if you like, behaving themselves within that context of the street scheme in a nighttime economy situation, then if I was that officer speaking to them, I wouldn't be looking to enforce that if they're behaving themselves. And if they start to misbehave, then it might be a police matter anyway, rather than an issue for being dealt with under the bylaws. Hopefully that explains those 2 questions you had.
Sorry, thank you. Actually, that was answered and allayed all the things that were asked me. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. Now I've got Zia next, and then Chairman. Yeah. I've got your initials down, so you must have.
Oh, yes, sorry about this. Yeah. Just sorry, I don't know whether it is the right one, because because we got some transport safety officer are in place now, which they are doing very good job. But I want to know, their role is quite varied. But one thing about their role, when the passengers do not pay, the ticket money, what actually this transport safety officer can do? I don't know. So this is only my question. Probably I'm not right, but if you can explain, or if I don't understand this, yeah, thank you.
Yes, certainly. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, it's a question about fare dodging or not having the correct.
No, I'm talking about the transport safety officer are in place, and they got a varieties of role. They are doing lots of things. Yeah. Am I right? I don't know whether in this agenda I'm asking this question. So what I'm asking, whether the transport safety officer, can they enforce the travelers, those who are not paying their ticket money, for example, train and bus. So what is their role and what they can do?
So can these officers do revenue protection, for instance?
They're not there in that role. That's not their role or function to act as revenue officers on behalf of the bus companies. They do work every week in partnership with the National Express revenue officers and other bus companies, where they'll go out and target routes where we're having high walkers or fare evaders, but they're not there in enforcing the payment of the fares. they're there as a presence and engaging with the passengers around ASB issues that might be happening on that bus route.
Okay, Chairman.
Thank you for the general public who's watching this meeting online. I'm Councillor Chairman Lal, Burnley City Council. My question is, first of all, I think I'd like to welcome and congratulate Anne for appointment. I don't think we have done it formally, but it's good that he got a new role. Okay, and you deserved it. My question on 2.2. It's all a worrying when we have rising crime, and which obviously doesn't do good for the travelling public's confidence on using of public transport. The figures given are quite high, that we got 49% increase of bus crime, and the only thing is we haven't been told how many of these crimes were investigated and how many of them were just in any form of action. That would be would give some sort of reassurance to the travelling public, and also be deterrent to the criminals who commit crimes on a transport network. So it'd be good if we can, in this report, have that kind of figure where what action is being taken against the criminals, and on the bylaws. While I welcome the bylaws, but like as Councillor Chris has said, that sometimes the way this bylaw can be applied, particularly look at the unfit to travel in on-campus state and state of dress. Sometimes people, whether they have some sort of mental illness or some other illness, or basically are poor, or they can't dress properly to go into somebody who can enforce this bylaw, or they may be coming from work or going to work. I mean, when you go in that kind of situation, you could be deemed to be not maybe on campus or not properly dressed. So could we have some authority that we are not going to penalise people because under those circumstances? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of what's happening to the criminals, there is action being taken. We had 148 people identified by officers and TSOs out on the network last year who have all been arrested. They were for a variety of offences, ranging from rape and also failing to appear for various offences. So there is action being taken against the criminals. In terms of the bylaws, could you just repeat that last bit on the bylaws, please?
One thing, under the unfit to travel, people maybe... No,
that's it. I've got that now. It's just that it was the unfit for travel specific bit. Sorry, my apologies for putting in. As in a similar way to what I explained to the other councillor around the intoxication, they will be given full training on how they will enforce the powers with notes of guidance. And yes, if somebody's coming home from work, if we went back to the 70s and they'd been down the mine and they were blacklisted, so then we wouldn't be dealing with them and giving them a ticket for that. But it's around an issue if we feel that there may be damage caused to the bus shelter, the bus seating, and that's when action would be taken. And in terms of if you're saying they've got mental health problems, then the main priority would be the safeguarding of that individual, not any enforcement against them.
Chairman, come back. It's good that they're actually being taken, but I think when you put all these reports in the general public domain, then we need to put them saying how many people we are taking action against and what the outcome has been. So that would act as a deterrent to any would-be criminals on a transport network.
Yeah, so just to help you out there, Paul, I think what we're asking for is on this report is that we just add some additional information, which is actually just highlighting what actions have been taken, how many prosecutions have been made, and any sort of resulting actions as well. I think that what you're saying is that will also help as a deterrent if we have that a little bit more public facing, so people can see.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Obviously, some of that I wasn't exactly sure what was required for this one, but under the Safer Travel Plan that's with the signatories to get signed off, there's a commitment in that, and it's part of the way of managing the performance of the Safer Travel policing team and partnership is that a report will be presented to this committee twice a year. And so I'll ensure that it's in the right, a better format, so it's more for public facing.
And I think that Bob's member engagement group can take stock of the, the performance issues of how many arrests have been made, how much contact's been made, what sort of issues the Safer Travel team and co have tackled out on the network. So we can touch base on that, the minutiae, if you like, on that, and report back to this committee.
Councillor Grinsell's got his hand up again, Chair.
Yes, we've had Zia, we've had Chairman. Yeah.
Bob is waving his hand.
Oh, sorry, Bob. He died, eyes on the side of my head.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm going to be a bit critical. First of all, the first thing to say is that it is paramount that our passengers are not only kept safe, but perceived to be safe. Many of the answers that I've gotten, thank you, Anne, for what you said, and I'm more than happy to take things further with more detail on my Meg. But I've heard quite a lot of platitudes, which frankly I can read for myself within the report. They've just been figures and answers that were there already in the report. I'm extremely concerned about the image of this region during the Commonwealth Games. As I said at the outset, the world's eyes will be upon us. And I read at 2.15, a Safer Travel tasking meeting is held every second Tuesday of the month. You've got 4 meetings to get it right, because this region, cannot afford to have the worldwide media look down on us in disdain. So I just want you to take that on board, because it's terribly important, not just for the Commonwealth Games, as I said, but for the future of our travelling public, that they are kept as safe as conceivably possible. I'm going to leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think there'll be a higher level safety group meeting between now and then with the High Command at Police and the Commonwealth Games Committee, I should think.
I think given the concerns that Councillor Grinsell's got, it might be worthwhile me arranging a dedicated briefing session for the MEG around what the security arrangements are for Commonwealth Games. So I think it will really help you understand it is quite a lot of work that is going on. Safer Travel Police and the wider team within TFW are embedded in that. There's a lot of detail in there which we won't discuss here today, but I think it will really answer all of your questions, Councillor Grinsell.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. That's precisely what we need, because at the moment we haven't got a clue what's going on. So I appreciate that and I welcome it.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on then to.
Madam Chairman, I did.
Oh, sorry, David. No, you must be brief. Promise.
I will be very brief. But listen, these figures of 3 people to do this job. I take it we're still employing bus station supervisors on the site, so that's extra resources there. And also in Dudley, I noticed on a couple of occasions I've been in the bus station, we've got the security guards as well, patrolling round. So, you know what I mean? I think we are doing our best to get as much in there as we possibly can, especially from the point of view as I see it anyway. I am concerned the same as everyone else in this room as regards to what is taking place out there. And the only question is that, yes, we know how many is recorded incidents, but how many goes unrecorded? That's the question, because there's no answer to that. A lot of people don't even bother these days to report problems.
Well, probably true, isn't it? So who wants to?
Just if I may, yes, as the councillor points out, then there are additional staff who are working in tandem with the police, and the same as we refer to the Safe Travel Police Partnership as a partnership between those multiple layers of operators, so British Transport Police, the West Midlands Police, and of course in addition to the staff we've talked about today, we're not forgetting the PCSOs on the network and around our transport interchanges, we have security staff and bus station staff again who all work in tandem. So there is a whole multitude of things, and of course, whilst absolutely taking on board everybody's points today around the level of crime on the network that has been reported, I think it is also worth just reflecting on the fact that as a region over the last 10 years we've seen ongoing year-on-year declines to crime on the network, and that in no way takes away the challenge that we need to be working to ensure that it is constantly and continually going down. But I think also it's relevant just to remember it in that context as well, because these figures, as members have pointed out, can be quite stark in their own right, but we need to make sure that we also understand the wider resource that's available to the network as well.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay, thank you for that then. Let's just move on. Now, agenda item 9, there's a kind of a similar factor in here about who has considered the report or who should have considered the report in advance, and I think we have to, of course, it belongs in the rail portfolio, but there's an air quality angle to it as well. So let's have it as primarily to rail, and that Chairman's Group can plot and follow implications for air quality as well. So I'll hand over to Toby. There he is, the train in the background there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can all hear me. This is the put, and yes, as you said, I actually thought I'd put Councillor Worrell down as the portfolio lead on this, but clearly that's not in the final version of the report, but I will correct that afterwards. Just to say, we did have a session at the pre-meeting on this report where there was a number of items of feedback which I took, and I've attempted to address all of those. I think first of all you will see there was a request for a map of the rail freight terminals in and around the combined authority area, which has now been included on the first page of the report, which hopefully gives an overview and including in yellow some of the proposed sites that are coming on stream or have been seeking planning permission over the last sort of 12 to 18 months to 2 years. So hopefully that gives you a sort of a picture of the types of traffic and where the terminals are. I've also included a section on, as well as sort of updating sort of recent progress, a bit around the air quality side and decarbonisation proposals for the rail freight industry as well, where there are a number of initiatives currently underway with new locomotives on order that will have multi-system traction power, so electric, diesel and battery, and there are also some tests of hydrotreated vegetable oil which are underway at the moment. I think the clear issues around those tend to be around the economics, speaking to people in the industry, that clearly the more complicated a locomotive, the more costly it is to purchase and maintain. And certainly when it comes to the HVO biofuels, that's certainly a more expensive alternative to diesel at the moment. So it can be quite challenging to actually make these things stack up. I've also included a little bit about what we are doing through the Grand Rail collaboration with the rest of the industry to support rail freight, I suppose, more than we have done hitherto in terms of the overall planning and management of the West Midlands regional network. across the whole, I suppose, of the wider region, and obviously that includes an awful lot of through rail freight services which transit the region as they do on the motorways, getting particularly from the coastal ports and the deep sea container ports in particular to the north of England and Scotland. So I'm not going to go through all of the detail of the report, but I'm certainly happy to take any questions on anything that's included in there.
Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor Chairman, Burnley City Council. On this board, the only thing what I'm missing is that we had a briefing at my MEG, on the air quality MEG, from Burnley University and another external presenter, and we were told that it could take up to 50 years to electrify all the freight lines, which in some may never happen through the lack of funding. And the alternatives are very expensive, whether it's hydrogen or battery powered, and obviously have limitations. So what are we doing to get some funding for retrofitting the freight trains to environment-friendly operations, which I haven't seen on the board? Are we going to go to the government, or where are we going to get the funding to get our diesel trains, make them, decarbonize them, and also there's some in our paragraph, the paragraph about the noise coming from diesel engines and or from station trains. The other issue that hasn't been mentioned, but Tim Huxtable brought to our attention that some of the diesel trains, when they're idling, they could be idling for 1 hour, waiting for their turn to get onto the main lines. And while they're idling, the diesel engine can't be switched off for practical reasons, and they're putting out pollution or damaging the air quality. So what can we do about that? So now the noise is mentioned on the report, one of the air pollution. So with two issues, one is about the funding for refitting all diesel trains, and secondly, what the idling situation. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for that. In terms of, I'll touch very quickly on electrification, as it was mentioned at the beginning. Yes, I mean, clearly, Network Rail has actually pulled together a strategy for decarbonising the rail network, which includes extensive electrification of the network, both for passenger and for freight. And actually, as with conversion of diesel trains, cost is the key issue here. I think we're broadly aligned with the rail industry in terms of the priorities, and that includes both passenger electrification with the intensively used Snow Hill lines through the centre of Birmingham being a priority candidate for future electrification, and also connections for freight such as Birmingham to Nuneaton and the electrified West Coast Main Line, as well as the longer term aspirations to get to the deep sea ports. And funding is clearly the issue. We've been hoping to do some work with Network Rail, and we have not been able to get funding authorised, for example, for Snow Hill lines electrification, even to do an initial outline business case. So there are the clear challenges. There are probably perhaps even more challenges within the freight sector because it is entirely private sector. The private sector operators will not invest unless there is a reasonable rate of return for them on that investment. And we had the unfortunate situation back in the autumn where diesel fuel prices were cheaper than the price of electricity for some of the freight operators, and they actually stood down all of their electric trains and switched them to diesel operation instead, which is clearly a situation we really don't want to be seeing on our transport network. So yeah, the cost challenges are huge, and actually, as I said, the decarbonisation of rail freight locomotives in particular is challenging. You can put lower polluting diesel engines in, and that's being done. But as I said, the minute you start putting diesel and electric and battery hybrids in, the costs increase substantially. And so far, only a couple of operators have actually gone down that route in any meaningful way. So yes, I agree, there are huge challenges, but as it is entirely within the private sector, there's very little influence that we can have on it. Finally, in terms of noise, and I did touch on this in my report following the feedback from the previous report, it is a difficult area, clearly. People have houses next to the railway line, and very often, the railway line has been there for nearly 200 years. The people of May, in some instances, have only moved in recently. But also, as has been highlighted, there are changes which take place within the railway, very often under Network Rail's permitted development, where track layouts can change, and that is wholly within the gift of Network Rail, which can mean that a train that's creating noise idling at a signal in one location may move a couple of 100 yards and then be idling at another station, and you get the transfer of that noise and the emissions over short distances. But there's very little input that can be done to actually change that. I did provide details of how to contact Network Rail to report particular issues, but we have, again, very little influence, and clearly very often the most effective means is for individual local authority councillors in particular wards to contact Network Rail directly, or, if they know, to contact the rail freight operator who is concerned. But I think one of the problems around idling is that actually if you start up a diesel engine, you generate more emissions potentially than you do when it's actually idling, and the freight operators, when they're stopped at a signal, have no idea often how long they're going to be stopped there for. So they really don't want to have their trains switched off, because it then takes time for them to start up again. And again, the startup of a diesel engine does tend to chuck out higher emissions than it does when it's just operating normally.
Tim?
Thank you very much, Jack. One of the key issues to me is the effect that High Speed 2 will have on rail freight, because as I understand it, there will be a number of train pathways that HS2 will create on the classic network in terms of shift of passenger services, which will allow more rail freight to travel along the classic network. And I just wondered if Toby had any comments on that and could see the potential in terms of greater numbers of rail freight along our existing rail network, which will have all the positive benefits that we've talked about and has been alluded to in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Huxtable. And there are certainly benefits. There's been talk previously about how many thousand lorry movements a year might be taken off the road by using the capacity that will be released by HS2 from the removal of some of the longer distance services, particularly to and from the northwest of England, from London through the region, that will benefit. I suppose it's quite difficult to quantify at the moment, other than additional freight paths are being planned into those future timetables, so that capacity will be available, and it will be down to the private sector freight operators to decide which paths to bid for and how best to take up that freight. But there will be benefits, and I would also say that during the construction of HS2, it is evident that HS2 Limited is trying to move as many construction materials as possible by rail, particularly into city centres. And as I say, the new HS2 terminal for aggregate stone that's been created at Washwood Heath is one example of that, and that's been up and running now for almost not quite 2 years. It will be 2 years this May, and certainly that's having a beneficial impact on the number of lorries that are being taken off the road that would otherwise be there to bring this construction material into the centre of Birmingham.
Okay. David?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to make reference to page 35 at the top of on the paragraph 3, where it's been suggested a similar growth for the freight line in Dudley. This particular area has been identified, it's ideal for it. It's well away from any residential properties. It's got a spur line off the line at the present moment, runs from Stourbridge Junction. And, you know, I'd welcome any investment we could get of that nature within the borough. So I do welcome and I hope that it will progress because it's the ideal situation for a freight line terminal at Round Oak. It's a former steelworks. It's quite industrial in and around that area. There'd be no inconvenience to any properties whatsoever. So, you know, it's a good thing. So I hope we can see some future in it.
Yep, just to respond to that, I think we're talking about expansion here, and clearly Round Oak is still very much an active steel terminal, and can see up to 3 trains a day on some of the busiest days throughout the year.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other contributions, questions?
Yeah, Chair, I've got my hand up.
Sorry, Pervez.
Thank you. Toby, sir, independent of, say, I take the point Tim is making, and hopefully we will have more capacity. So, these freight operators, do they have independent policy of expansion in Midlands and, say, for instance, use for long haulage, the trains, and then bring it to centres and using small lorries? And my second question is, what's the percentage of profit they make? Is it possible you can tell us?
Yeah, so I'll take the first point first. I might have to ask you to repeat the second question because I lost you slightly there. Yeah. But in terms of the market, certainly, you know, it is a private sector freight market. The operators are very much incentivised to grow that market because obviously that reflects on their bottom line, and you know, the more business they can create, the more they can actually grow, and the more they can bring in the profits for their shareholders. In terms of the specific issue of city centre freight, this is something I touched on in the report in section 4 of the paper, where there is a lot of work going on at the moment looking at restoring what used to be in British Rail days the old sort of parcels traffic, which was brought into city centres along with newspapers at one stage. And clearly there is a move towards a return towards that small scale logistics, and there have been trials, as you can see in the paper, of bringing rail freight into London Euston Station for onward distribution by bicycle, and we've been working and talking to Coventry City Council about the opportunities there specifically for tying up potential freight services in future with a sustainable onward freight distribution system within Coventry City Centre, either by bicycle, potentially even by drone from the nearby drone port that's being planned, or indeed by pedestrian delivery. So I think we're going to see this as a huge growth area. It's very much in line with the emerging thinking within the Combined Authority and the urban transport group more widely in terms of how we decarbonise our urban centres. So I think it is early days yet, but there are people who are actively trialling the technology and investing in conversion of redundant passenger trains to enable this traffic to be carried and delivered straight into the heart of our cities. How that then is made to work in terms of the timetabling and the onward distribution is going to need a bit of thought, and I know Network Rail have already been looking at this at various locations. But clearly, you know, a lot of the old infrastructure is still in place. The old ramps, for example, at New Street Station that used to take the parcels and Royal Mail traffic underneath the station are actually still there. So I think there is, as I said, work to be done. But I think it's one of the growth areas that I see, and I think we should be optimistic about rail being able to play a role.
Thank you, sir. My second question was, what's the profit margin these guys have?
I'm afraid I don't know, and I'm not sure that's even in the public domain, councillors.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Okay, well, thank you, Toby, for that. It's something that certainly at least one meg we'll be looking at leading on, and we'll be following up during the next political municipal year. Thank you. Now let's look at our COVID recovery update. This is hot off the press, as up to date as it possibly can be as to what's going on out there in the light of COVID recovery. Pete.
Thank you, Chair. And just a brief update. We've actually covered off some of this as we've gone through the through the meeting anyway. But in terms of updates around the recovery on the network, we are starting to see at the end of Plan B some return of passenger numbers across the public transport network. The rail update, I was actually waiting the figures for those, so I won't quote a rail figure to you until I've got the clarity of the latest coordinated one. But in terms of, we are seeing an increase and upturn in the actual numbers. In terms of metro, we have been seeing a fast recovery in terms of some of the numbers. And of course, we were quoting pre-COVID, but we know we've had some disruption on the network, but since it's been back in, we are now recording up to 85% of actions recovery across there as well. And of course, we've heard some figures today around the bus network as well, and updates across the bus network. We're starting to see that those figures creep up above 75% and closer towards 80% over the course of recent days. And there are some differing pictures within the network more widely, but that we are reviewing. But nonetheless, we're seeing some positive numbers. We've heard today, and we've talked around previously on the disruption to services that have been caused as a response to driver issues. That wasn't just associated with bus, but we saw that across the rail network as well. But what we have seen is much of an improvement in terms of the performance of services operated and the punctuality across the rail network and also across the bus network in recent weeks. And we heard from Chris earlier about how they are working to if you like, mitigate and reduce the levels of particular sickness. And I think that will probably be one of the biggest keys to dealing with this, is the sickness levels starting to return to some normality. And of course, we've seen that impact positively on the rail network as well. We've obviously, with the end of Plan B, seen some changes to the requirements around in generally and in public around face coverings. Of course, we are still recommending to our customers in interchanges and on public transport settings as a courtesy to others to wear face coverings where they are able, and in our own settings we're still requiring staff, unless exempt, to wear coverings as well. But obviously that is starting to see a change in level of use across the network as well. But I think another element linked to that really is the feeling of safety. So particularly on the bus and also the other modes, but we are looking to work with our providers, particularly within the Bus Alliance, but also within the Grand Rail collaboration and the Metro, to ensure that we promote the levels of cleanliness across the network that have been supported throughout the pandemic, and that those levels are continuing. The work that was undertaken to keep the network safe will continue, and that will hopefully really help with us being able to promote the public transport recovery as we work through with those organisations, the Rail Collaboration and Bus Alliance and Metro, and of course continue to promote sustainable travel as well. We heard through the bus report a highlight on bus priority and some of the major schemes, Sprint, Cross City, and of course we know the Bus Service Improvement Plan also set out a plan to government some ambitious bus priority across our region, which we know is not a quick overnight fix, but we have some in trail that's already being delivered, and we know it's a requirement of government in order to seek further funding. So I think it's really important to set out the role of bus priority in us trying to ensure that as the recovery gains momentum, so does the punctuality and reliability of the bus network as well, so that we don't find that we have more buses stuck in queuing traffic. And working towards that. So that's one of the key elements that we are working with colleagues across the organisation and local authorities with as well. I'll leave it there, Chair, in the interest of time, but happy to pick up any questions or comments.
Any comments, questions? Okay. Okay, well, look forward to your next report in March and see how the position has changed, improved even, or funded or help for bus recovery anyway. Thank you. Right, we've got our regular report back from our member engagement groups. Any questions or comments on these? It's good to see the visit to Perry Bar Station is finally on the timetable in the calendar. Urge as many of you to attend as you possibly can. Get out in the fresh air for a change. Any comments, Tim?
Thank you. It's on that very issue, and the site visit's very welcome return. And unfortunately, since organising it, I've been made aware that the sprint infrastructure of the interchange won't be in place in time for our meeting, and that the sprint infrastructure, as I understand, and officers can correct me if I get it wrong, won't be in place now until April. So I still think it's well worth doing, and I would like to do a follow-up site visit once the infrastructure is in. Obviously, in April we would be in Purda, so in terms of the pre-election period, so it wouldn't be appropriate to do it during April and before the local elections. So I would like to organise a follow-up meeting in May after the local elections for as many of us who have been re-elected to visit the site. But so it's not on the scale that I'd hoped it to be, but I still think from an interchange perspective it's well worthwhile. Thank you.
The councillors concerned, local councillors are included and invited.
That's what I've asked, Chair.
Okay, let's make sure it's carried out. Yeah, sorry, Richard.
Yeah, just to say the idea is that it is a look at everything. Unfortunate news, I didn't know that about Springton, but we would be looking both at progress on the rail station and bus facilities more generally. The report was put together, I think, before there was a decision about the rail and metro meg. That, in line with the decision on the sprint date, is now the 21st of February, so that we can do the visit on the 28th.
Good.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other remarks on this? Thank you. It's good to see the member engagement groups kind of taking off and even thriving, even during this difficult period we continue to have to cope with. Thank you.
Just make a point, so just in terms of the member, it does refer to this sprint group in a reference to our team decided not to proceed with a park and ride along the A34 North. Does give an indication through that comment that a notion of an A34 park and ride has been dropped, which is not the case. So I just wanted to make that point, given that was reported in the meeting, given that this is a public document. I think it's just worthy of that being recorded and referenced.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Now, there are no transport reports going to the Combined Authority on Friday. They're concentrating on the budget, and it will be, is it another informal one or a hybrid mixed meeting?
I'm not sure.
Well, some will be coming in online, but I think some will be attending in person, from what I can see from Dan's note.
I think there will be a meeting at the Hampton. We've not had any indication that it will be an informal meeting like it will be last time.
As it was,
of course,
the budget.
COVID restrictions have been lifted, so
Yeah.
I expect it will be in person.
Okay. Thank you. Right, well, thank you, everybody. Guess how you'll be going out campaigning, because it's that time of the political cycle, and of course next month, March, will be our last TDC meeting of the political year as such. So go forth and campaign.
As Bobby's doing at the moment.
Yeah.